Hey guys, welcome back. This is Anthony, and in this video we're going to talk about inflation. Now I understand that inflation is a weird kind of term that you really don't want to think about and you really only hear on the political debate stages or in your economics class. But if you don't understand inflation, it might actually ruin the life of your dreams. Honestly, I know it can be a bit confusing to understand, and it took me a little bit to get as well, even just outside of my economics classes in high school and college, but it is something that's really important, so let's dive into it together. Now, just on a very basic level, inflation is defined as the raise in prices of a basket of goods. And this causes a decrease in the purchasing power of your money. Now, purchasing power is also a very important term to understand when we're talking about inflation, so get that in your minds because we're going to be hearing it a lot today. Now, when we're talking about inflation, I have to get my nerd on, so if you don't mind, here we go. And these are the closest things to nerdy I can find. They're just my wife's glasses. We don't have any frames in the house, so pretty sad. I wish I could be a better nerd. Sorry, guys. But basically, how is inflation calculated? You need to talk in terms of CPI and PCE. Those don't make any sense, and you don't need to understand them, but here they are pretty basically. CPI stands for Consumer Price Index, and PCE Price Index stands for Personal Consumption Expenditure Chain Price Index. Now, I had to look on my screen anyway, so you're not going to remember that. Who cares? CPI just measures the product cost across a basket of goods. So basically, if I got some bananas here, how much do these bananas cost versus how much these apples cost, how much everything in this basket costs? CPI just measures what all those things cost. Now, the Personal Consumption Expenditure Chain Price Index, PCE Price Index, measures how much the good costs now versus how much the good costs then. And that is the product cost inflation, because it costs more now, because there's more bananas, obviously, than it did then. That's basically how they measure what inflation is. How much the products cost over a basket of goods. Now, I know this is a pretty imperfect example, because inflation doesn't actually happen over one item, but over the basket of items in a category. So basically, everything that a household is buying in America, how much that costs now versus how much it used to cost, that is the cost of inflation. Now, both of these, the PCE and the CPI, are put out by government bureaus, and this is the last that we need to hear about them because they're boring. Now, it's important to note that the cost of a good going up doesn't necessarily mean inflation, but inflation is a complete economic phenomena that happens when the whole of an economy inflates in price, and everything goes up in price, even though some goods might stay the same, some might go down, but the majority of goods go up in price. Now, this is how we really understand purchasing power as well, because if my $1 used to buy 6 bananas, but it now only buys 1 banana, this is 3 bananas, my purchasing power of my dollar goes down by half. So now that we understand what inflation is and how it's measured, we need to understand how it is caused. Now, there's two main causes of inflation, and they both have really boring economic-sounding names. So we're just going to talk in generalities about what normally causes inflation in a marketplace. Now, the main cause of inflation happens when there is more demand for goods than there is supply. So there's more money in the market, people wanting to buy things, but the suppliers aren't able to match that because they don't have the labor, they're not able to continue to make as much as there is money for demand. So the cost of all the goods goes up to meet the demand. Now, the most common example of this is more money being printed. And so we hear about crazy times like how in Zimbabwe at some point they were printing $3 trillion notes because money just kept inflating and inflating and inflating and inflating because they were printing more and more of it, but the production of goods was staying the same. So there was so much more money to buy things, but there weren't more goods for the money to buy, so the prices kept getting higher and higher and higher. Now, this is also why you hear examples similar to how in Germany in the 1940s, when the Nazis were in control, people would burn dollars because it was cheaper than buying firewood because of how much money they were printing, inflating the price of everything. So it was cheaper to just burn $5 and $10 notes than it was to go out and buy firewood. But now let's bring it all back home. And I live in America, and I assume most of my viewers are going to live in America as well, or at least be familiar with the American economic system. And so from 1913 to 2013, over those 100 years, what has the inflation rate been in America, and what does that even mean? Now, there is a lot of history that goes into why inflation has fluctuated and gone from upwards of 9% for the decades of 1913 to 1923, down to now a little bit under 3% for the last 10 years. But basically, inflation over the last 100 years has been around 3.22%, which means that something that cost $100 in 1913 costs more than $2,300 now. However, since the 1970s, the inflation rate has been decreasing from around 7% per year over those 10 years to now it's been around 2.5% per year. And what most people use to estimate inflation over the next years to come is just about 2%, and that's the number I really want us to focus on as we continue in this conversation. It might not be the most 100% accurate economically, but it is what makes most sense and is most practical as we talk about taking control of our money and learning about our finances in the future. That was a lot of nerdy stuff. You don't need to understand all that, but I think it's important to have a backstory and understanding of what inflation is, how it has been assessed, the history of it, in order to have a really good conversation now about why the heck it matters to you. Because you don't care about all that stuff. I don't care about all that stuff, and I just researched it and told you about it. Now, one of the main reasons that inflation is important to you is that term that we talked about at the very beginning of the video, purchasing power. Now, inflation means your money is going to be worth less and less and less, and if you want to take control of your money effectively, you need to understand how to do that in the course of inflation, because inflation is inevitable. It's going to continue to go up. We don't want it to happen. We want the money to stay the same, but historically it has gone up, so we need to account for that as we talk about our financial planning and about our financial futures. And honestly, like I said at the beginning of the video, if you don't understand inflation or account for it in your financial plans, you're not going to be able to have the life of your dreams, because you think you're going to have enough money, but it's going to end up falling flat if you don't really understand what your money is going to be worth in 20, 30, 40 years. And this is really the remedy to not having an understanding of inflation, and this is how you kind of tie in all that boring nerdy stuff at the beginning of the video to what it actually means for you, and that just means you have to invest your money. Honestly, you can put your money in a savings account all you want, but your money is actually going to continue to lose money. At least in most savings accounts, they're not going to account for the rate of inflation, and you're going to end up losing money effectively. So for instance, I have a Wells Fargo account that gets 0.01% interest on my savings up to, I think, $20,000 or something like that. I don't have $20,000 in that account with them. I actually put my savings in a different account that I'll tell you about in a second. But that 0.01% does me absolutely no good. So if I have $10,000 in that account right now, and inflation continues at 2% every year down the road, that $10,000 is only going to be worth about $9,800 next year. And then the year after that, it's going to be worth $9,600, then $9,400. I know those are rounding numbers because inflation does compound, just like interest does. But that's how much money my money is actually going to be worth if I only have savings in the 0.01% interest account. And so if you put away all of your money, you save $1 million, but you don't account for inflation, your money is going to continue to be devalued over time, as we've seen with how the purchasing power goes down because of inflation. Now, there are savings accounts that can help with this. For instance, I have money in a Wealthfront account, which used to be 2.57% interest. Now it's 2.32% interest. And also an Ally account, which is 2.1% interest. Now, both of those would more similarly account for inflation. So every year, instead of my money having less purchasing power, it would just stay the same. Because if my money makes 2% interest, but it also loses 2% of its purchasing power, it's just going to come out of the wash, and it's still going to be worth the same amount instead of actually losing money. And if you're interested in either of those accounts, I'll put a link below into what those look like. I would just do your research beforehand, because both of them are online accounts, and they are FDIC insured, which is one of the reasons that I use them. But if you are uncomfortable with them, I obviously would be the first one to tell you, only invest or put your money where you're comfortable with it. That being said, the real remedy for inflation in your finances is investing your money. Like I said, you can save all you want, but your money is going to continue to be devalued. However, if you invest your money and put it where your money is going to continue to grow and to make you more money, you're going to be able to end out ahead of inflation. So if you saw my first video, a silly video of me talking about why me cutting my own hair will actually make me $10,000 over the next 12 years, I talked about understanding your average rate of return versus your rate of return adjusted for inflation. And this is what I want to talk about a little bit here. So as I said in that video, the S&P 500 has an average rate of return over the last 500 years. Oh my freaking goodness, I'm tired. The S&P 500 over the last 90 years has had an average rate of return of right around 9.8%. But if you adjust that for inflation, it's only been around 7%, 6.8, 7%, right around that number. This is why most financial advisors or financial planners that you'll go to will use that 7% number instead of that 9.8, 10% number, because even though you're probably going to be able to get that 9.8% return if everything continues down the same trajectory that it has, and I'm not saying that you're going to, this is not financial advice, this is just my opinion. If you're able to get that 10%, it's not actually going to feel like you got that money down the road when you're able to access that money and use it. And that's because of inflation. That's because you know that your purchasing power is going to go down as your money continues to grow, because inflation is going to make it that way. So if you see that money as a 7% return rather than as a 10% return, you're going to understand better how you're going to be able to utilize your money when everything costs more because it has been inflated. And that's pretty much why you need to understand inflation, so that you can have a better financial future. Because if you don't really get inflation, you're not going to realize that just saving your money is actually making you lose money rather than having your money invested. Now, obviously, we want to have your money invested in smart ways, in places that you trust and understand, because you need to understand where your money is going. And we need to make sure that you set up a good financial foundation before you invest your money. You need to make sure that you've gotten rid of all your consumer debt. You need to make sure that you have an emergency fund saved up so that you can access liquid cash in the event that anything bad happens. And you need to make sure that you're budgeting and tracking your expenses. Because if you're not doing all of that, there's no point in investing, because you don't really have a plan for your money now, so you don't really have a plan for your money in the future, and that's really what investing is all about, is planning for your future. So if you have all those things in place, you're investing for your future, you understand inflation, you're going to have a better, robust knowledge of what your money is really going to look like down the road, how much you're really going to need to live on, and what that means for you. So if you got anything out of this video, I hope it wasn't the definition of inflation. I hope it wasn't what the heck CPI and PEC are. PCE, it's not even PECC, I don't even freaking know. I hope it wasn't even what inflation is and what it's done in history. I hope it's why you need to be investing your money now, so that you are able to live the life of your dreams in the future. Once again, that's what this channel is all about. I just want to make sure that I'm helping to coach people contextually as to what to do with their finances, so they can take control of their money and live the life of their dreams down the road. If you guys are new to the channel, definitely subscribe. I have new videos coming out Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. Now, these videos are going to be on everything from how to invest your money, how to start a budget, and anything in between. Whatever you guys want to know about, definitely let me know, and I'll make a video on it. But this is all for today, and I'll see you guys in the next one.